So, conclusion of the subject of methods of time measurement. Do they show a long time or a young Earth? We have now discussed a number of lines of evidence that seem plainly to show that the estimate of 4 or 5 billion years for the age of the Earth must be much too great. Such diversified processes as the fall of meteorites, the breakup of comets, the influx of dissolved chemicals into the ocean like salt and so on, the escape of helium into the atmosphere, the growth of the ocean, the growth of continents by volcanism, all give ages much less than this. And this is on the basis of geologists' own principle of uniformity. We didn't accept it as true, we just suppose and go with their thoughts, and it didn't turn out that the Earth was 4 to 5 billion years old, far less than that. And that's not even the case. Obviously, in terms of the revealed facts of an initial growth, creation, and the great discontinuity in all natural processes at the time of the Deluge, even those latter ages must be too large. Just how much too great is impossible to determine. Is as impossible to determine by scientific calculation as it is to determine the true age of the Earth by any of the radioactive minerals. Just too many givens that you have to make up because we weren't there historically. Like, was there a possibility of a great ice canopy over the Earth that would impede the entrance onto the Earth's surface of external radiation? Once again, we emphasize that the only certain basis of prehistoric chronology must come by way of divine revelation. This revelation in the Bible records a creation and subsequent universal flood, both occurring only a few thousand years ago, and nothing in true science can possibly negate this. Nor, in fact, when the data are rightly understood, does it even seem to do so. Dr. Don Patton. We'll look at the illustrations given by William Stansfield, professor of biological sciences, California Polytechnic State University. Now, he is an evolutionist. He is an anti-creationist. He debates against creationism. He is very strongly opposed to the idea that the Earth is young. But he acknowledges that there are some strong indications of a young age for the Earth. For example, he cites water from volcanoes. It produces juvenile water. He said that it indicates the Earth is less than 500 million years old. He says that we've got about 600 active volcanoes around the world, and just 70 producing at the rate of the average would fill the oceans with water in about 4 to 4.5 billion years. The 600 we've got would do it in about 500 million. We talked about the helium in the atmosphere. He said that that indicates an age of less than 150 million. I think the figures indicate an age of less than 10,000. But even his dates certainly don't fit with the billions, the 5 billions of years that are required for the evolutionists. He talked about lavas from volcanoes and points out that 4 volcanoes at the average rate of lava flow could produce the Earth's crust in 4 billion years. Yet we have 600 of them going, active in the world today. And we know that the volcanic activity was much greater in the past. He talked about uranium accumulation. It's about 100 times faster than it's being depleted from the ocean. It's accumulating rapidly. He said that that indicates an age of less than 1 million. He looked at the pressure in the oil reserves, and he says that the Earth's age is less than 10,000. You've got tremendous pressures there, and that's why you have the gushers sometimes very dramatically blowing debris into the atmosphere. We can measure the porosity of the rocks. We know about how much pressure they'll hold for how long. We find that the pressure will hold for just a few thousand years. And yet, there's the pressure still there today. We looked at population dynamics, and we find that in 2 million years, supposed to be the age of man, it's increasingly at the population rate with only 2 people beginning, you get 102,700, which is just a ridiculous number of people on the earth. Just an infinitesimal portion of that, Stanfield says, is what we have on the earth today. Meteoritic dust. Millions of tons per year coming to the earth. Where is it? No indication of it in the strata. There's good ways to detect it from the nickel. We talked about radiocarbon in the atmosphere. He said that indicates the earth is less than 20,000 years old. It only takes 30,000 years to reach equilibrium, and it's 30% short. I think his figures are conservative, but he acknowledges that there are a lot of indications that indicate that the earth is young. But he has an answer for that. Of course, he doesn't believe those indications, and his answer is seen as we continue to look at a quotation in his book, The Science of Evolution. By this methodology, he says, creationists stand guilty of the crime they ascribe to evolutionists, namely uniformitarianism, that is, assuming everything remains the same. All of the above methods for dating the earth, the age of the earth, its varying strata, are questionable because the rates are likely to have fluctuated widely over our history. We weren't there way back hundreds of thousands of years to find out that things were different. He said a method that appears to have much greater reliability for determining absolute ages of rocks is that of radiometric dating. Now, we've already looked at that and find that's hogwash. So he looks at the great number that indicate that the earth is young and says, we could chuck that because we know this is a crime to assume things remain constant. Really? I'm going to stick with the radiometric dating, he says. But then he goes on to critique that in the next paragraph. He says, if, and I think that's a big if, we assume that a rock contained no lead-206 when it was formed. Right, correct that. So no lead in it. All lead-206 now in the rock was produced by radioactive decay of U-238. Of course, we know that's not the case. Original lead is indistinguishable from lead coming from uranium in decay. The rate of decay has been constant, and good reason to question that. There has been no differential leaching by water of either element, and we know that happens, and no U-238 has been transported into the rock from another source. You weren't there, so you wouldn't know. And I would add, you know that this has been constant for billions of years, which really makes it extreme. Then he says, with all of these assumptions then, we might expect our estimate of age to be fairly accurate. Each assumption is a potential variable, the magnitude of which can seldom be ascertained, because we just weren't there examining all the circumstances that rock laying on that stream bed that's empty now of water was there for millions and millions of years. Suppose an elephant came over, mastodon, crushed it down, and then broke it up. Wind blew some of the rock pieces away. You don't have good or subject. Well, I'll accept his conclusion regarding this, and notice the next paragraph, which I think is a fair assessment of the reasonableness of these assumptions. He says that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating methods that they are claimed to be. Yeah, that's an exaggeration. Age estimates on a given geological stratum by different radiometric methods are quite often different. Yep. In cases where the daughter's product is a gas, as in the decay of potassium argon to the gas argon, it is essential that none of the gas escapes from the rock over long periods of time. It is obvious that radiometric methods are quite often quite different, sometimes by hundreds of millions of years. There's absolutely no reliable long-term radiological clock. Too many events in history that we weren't there to observe take place. When we don't really know the beginning conditions, and we know we don't, and when we don't observe over the period of time, for just a short period of time, and extrapolate over billions of years, then we know we don't know. Actually, when the creationists have more methods and extrapolate over a shorter period of time, then their conclusions ought to be more scientifically valid. When you look at the actual evidence, there is much stronger, valid scientific evidence for concluding that the Earth is young. You have to ignore all various obvious points and make a number of unwarranted assumptions to come up with a conclusion that it's old. So let's go to Darwin. Article I got from Marvin L. Lubinell states in his book, Bones of Contention. Love this book. Covers a lot of different topics on the issue of creation versus evolution. Prehistoric man. Now allow me to quote Darwin. The author says, but just in proportion as this process of extermination has acted on an enormous scale, so must the number of intermediate varieties which have formerly existed be truly enormous. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Good question. Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this is perhaps the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. It's not even a theory, it's a model. Theory is observable, falsifiable, and repeatable. This obviously is not. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record. Darwin said that the number of intermediate forms fossilized in the rocks must be enormous, that they have not been found, that their absence is the most serious objection one can have against his theory, and that they have not been found only because of the imperfection of the fossil record. Darwin felt that the fossil evidence was so important, and the lack of transitions was such a serious threat to his theory, that he devoted an entire chapter in The Origin to the imperfection of the geological record. For 100 years, evolutionists paraded the fossils they found as evidence for evolution. In the early 1970s, when it became obvious that we had a more than adequate sampling of the fossil record, the grim reality dawned that those transitional fossils were not to be found. The punctuated equilibria model of evolution was then invented to explain why they were not found. However, it is imperative to emphasize that the punctuated equilibria model does not remove the need for transitional fossils. Well, I try to look it up in the dictionary, but you can look it up on the internet, punctuated equilibria, find out what it means. I haven't indicated there. What it talks about is that there's transitional fossils and a lot of different things in between the rock strata. Like there's a space between one rock and another, which is obviously nonsensical. No evidence can be found for something which can't be found. The popular myth is that the hominid fossil evidence virtually proves human evolution. The reality is that this evidence has been a disappointment to evolutionists and is being de-emphasized. In actuality, the human fossil evidence falsifies the concept of human evolution. The Bible, the Word of the living God, clearly declares that humans were specifically created. The human fossil evidence is completely in accord with what the scriptures teach. In his book on pages 189 and 92, he goes on to say, many think of Darwin as a religious man. He studied for the ministry at Cambridge. His wife, Emma Wedgwood, daughter of Hosea Wedgwood, maker of Wedgwood china, seems to have been an evangelical Christian. Also, Darwin refers to the origin